So, hi everybody, welcome to another indie author interview. I am joined here today by Madison Mouser, who is the author of These Shallow Waters, which just came out on May 1st. So, I'm really excited to talk to you today. Thank you for taking some time.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's still quite surreal, so I'm
Yeah,
excited that other people are excited about it.
that's awesome. Well, let's just get right into it. Tell us a little bit about what made you want to become an author and what your path to publication was.
Sure. So it started when I was really young, even so young as like 5 and 6. We'd, make those little taped together books in
Mhm.
school, and I would bring home the ones about birds and going to the dentist and about my hamster Gippy and, all of these different things, which I'm sure my parents still have all of them, which would be hilarious to look at. Um, so I always had this innate need to tell stories, but I wasn't really sure how to go about that in a good manner. Anything I would have produced at that point probably was not great. Um, but as I got a little bit older, and I really started, reading a lot more, and really developing characters in my own head about, oh, well, my friend Megan could go to the store and be a superhero all of a sudden, and all these different things. I remember really talking to my teachers at that point and going, okay, I don't know what I need to do to make my writing better, but I know I want to get there. And I even remember in fifth grade, whenever my teacher had, read aloud another book, and I stood at her desk crying, thinking, a kid can't publish a book and I'll never get there. And she was just always so encouraging and so sweet. And in fact, I gave her a complimentary copy of my book as well.
Wonderful.
She's actually mentioned in the acknowledgments, funny enough.
Great.
Um, but then once I got a little bit older and continued writing stories just for myself, um, it was one of those things where I really never felt like I had the right idea, and the right story to really push out into the world on a larger scale outside of my own notebook, I guess. And about a couple of years ago, my husband and I were talking about the book publishing journey of various authors. And one thing that I really looked at was traditional versus indie publishing, because up until a number of years ago, self-publishing was didn't have the same feeling that traditional publishing did. And now there are just so many more doors open. Editors are a lot more available, graphic designers are a lot more available, and they're so much more willing to work with everyone else. And it's become a lot more of an open community, which is amazing. So about a year ago, then I found that I really had this strange idea. And I was telling my husband about it, and I said, here's the thing, I want to talk about it, but not yet. He goes, okay, thank you. And he's so supportive. My husband, he let me stew on it for several months until I finally said, okay, I'm ready to talk about it now. And I really laid out this story about these seal people and this woman, and he goes, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I think it'll be great. And so really it was a lot of trying to figure out how all the pieces would work together. And I told him, though, I said, this is it, this is the one I can finish, I can do this. And so from there, we went on vacation and came back, and I said, I'm going to write it. And I wrote the first draft in about 6 weeks, which
Wow.
is fast. So after that, I connected with my editor and graphic designer, and it all just went beautifully from there.
How did you find like the editor and graphic designers to like a specific place that you look, or like how does that work?
I actually found my editor first. I found her through social media. Her Instagram ad had actually popped up in one of my stories. And I did research on her as well as other books that she had edited. And I actually saw that fantasy wasn't her main genre. She mostly did strictly romance novels. But I saw she would do it on a case by case basis. And so I thought, she really likes Alice in Wonderland. I love Alice in Wonderland. This is the one for me. And I talked to her, and that we got connected. We just felt like we really flowed well with each other and worked well. And she actually introduced me to the graphic designer who also did my formatting, because she is another author that my editor works with. So it all just worked out swimmingly.
Cool. That's that. I know what that wasn't like meant to be a pun, right?
No, not at all, but it's too perfect.
And so, for this book, it sounds like, I mean, you like you say, you just came home and wrote it in 6 weeks, but like, what was your process like? Do you pants? Do you plot? Do you quilt? What do you do?
I am a huge plotter. I because it was the first one where I really felt like I could finish it, I knew I had to see the ending first. So what I did was I thought about the ending and I thought about the beginning, and now I thought, okay, I need to figure out how to get from point A to point B. And so I definitely wrote an outline. It wasn't, I know there are some authors that make these beautiful verbose outlines that should be anthologized, but mine was nowhere near like that. I really just needed my guide points. So I knew once I did that, I could get to that ending. Which funny enough is in book two. But it was definitely an outline driven story. It's always been how my brain works. So I made the outline, and then I was actually able to follow it really closely. I only had to deviate a couple of times just to fix a couple of items. So.
Awesome. And you said that this is, obviously this is book one. How many is it planned to be? Do you know?
Yes. So there will be two books for Ellie and Lawson, these main characters
Okay.
specifically. So their main story will conclude at book two. However, there will also be a book three where Ellie and Lawson are there, but they will not be the narrators. So they'll show up, I think, about halfway, if I remember correctly. And then actually, there will be a book four later on that actually talks about our villain, Isla's origin story. So
Cool. That sounds awesome. So what do you enjoy most about writing fantasy? Clearly, I mean, you have 4 books plotted out, like, well, 3 more, so what do you enjoy most about writing in that genre?
I just love all of the possibilities. I grew up as an only child until age 12. And so I was always just thinking outside of my own world and imagining all of these different possibilities. And fantasy really allows you to bring all of that in and make it tangible. Um, Now, as I got older, I definitely loved the romance part of it. And funny enough, it wasn't even really till I fell in love that I enjoyed it. I could have given or taken whether or not a book had romance in it before. But ever since that, it's been a very intriguing thought about, oh, well, all of these people are living outside of this world that we are in, and they have families too. They fall in love, they have connections, and how does all of that intertwine? So
Mm. And I think that there's also like you said, like trying to intertwine fantasy with that romance too, which obviously we get romantasy out of. Which romantasy like just started like did it like the genre just start like last year, like with book
it
talk?
it is fairly new, yes.
Yeah, because so there's romantic fantasy and there's fantasy romance, but then there's the romantasy. So what do you define romantasy as? What's that distinction?
I define romantasy as really a book set in a fantasy setting, but with the romance being the main plot driver.
Hmm.
And I really struggled with this particular book for a while as what to define it as, because it is partly set in our world. It's half in our world, half in their Selkie world. And so, really, though, once I figured out that the romance was definitely the plot driver. There was obviously a bigger plot going on, but it really centers around how Ellie and Lawson communicate and get to know each other and build their bond in order to take on this big looming threat.
Hmm. Hmm. I think that's definitely a really good definition. And so when you write, what do you need in your writing space to stay focused?
Music. I bought these over the head headphones that have been absolutely amazing. And they weren't even expensive. They were like 30 bucks. And they have been the best thing because I have two giant schnauzers whom I love to death. They're sitting right over there and may bark at any moment. But they're pretty loud. And my husband, being the godsend that he is, entertained them for the most part while I wrote these shallow waters. So I had to have something that could really keep me in the world that I was trying to create. And really having a set playlist really helped because I wasn't worried about, oh, a new song's coming on. So, oh, let me think about that song for a few minutes and get out of the groove that I had gotten in. So, music, absolutely. And also probably Diet Coke.
And for music, words or no words?
um, a little of both. Specifically for this one, it was very word oriented. For a book that I'm working on that will actually come out before book two does, it's been a lot of non-word music.
Mm, awesome, cool. And so what's your kryptonite as a writer? What gets in your way?
Oh my gosh, word choice.
Mm,
I can sit and look at a word for 20 minutes before finally just putting something there and just knowing that my wonderful editor will take care of it later. And that took a long time because I am definitely a perfectionist in so many aspects of my life. And I wanted whatever I give to my editor to be correct as much as it can the first time. So the thesaurus is my friend, and Lord knows I spend way too long looking at words.
word choice. I mean, I think that I haven't heard that one before, but I think that that's very practical, right? It's like, you know, also like saying like she said, like, like she replied, like that repetition is also like frustrating for me when I'm writing because I'm just like how many different ways can you say that she said? Like,
Right.
like so I relate to that. I relate to that. So let's move on to talking about these shallow waters specifically. Obviously, it's the first book, so we don't have to worry about spoilers. So, if you had to describe these shallow waters in one sentence or less, what would that sentence be?
So I really had to think about that because there's so much that happens and there's so many points of view it could take. Now, These Shallow Waters is written in two points of view, both Ellie and Lawson, because I really felt like you needed both sides to fully grasp what was happening. But I do think it all originally started with Ellie. So whenever I've thought about how to describe the book, I finally came up with a woman who helps the Selkies reclaim their kingdom from sirens.
I like it. I like it. It definitely is short, sweet, and to the point, and there's still some little mystery about some things. So if you had to choose your favorite character to write, who's that character and why?
I would have to go with Lawson. Um, I absolutely adore Ellie. I think she's funny. I wrote her, so I'm a little biased. But she is very much how I speak to other people, especially my mom. My mom and I have a very quippy relationship, and we're very quirky that way with each other. But Lawson is so much more unrefined, which is funny because he has an upbringing that allows him to be refined, but he's so much more how I think in my head. And so he was who I really related to more as I wrote the book. And so as a result, he's a bit of a stinker sometimes, but I mean, it doesn't fall far from the author, I guess.
And if you had to think about what the most challenging part of writing this book was, what was that?
um, Definitely because it's set both in our world as well as Lawson's world and then becomes Ellie's world. I really had to think about how to balance modern with medieval because his world is a little bit behind the times that way, but also making sure that there's enough balance of both as well as the fantastical element to it. So making sure the balance was there was definitely on my mind the entire time.
Balance. And for a book like this, and when you have like multiple books, like how do you choose like where to end it? Like you said that like the ending you plotted out was book two, so like how do you decide where book one ends?
I know a lot of other authors I've spoken with have looked at what's a halfway point,
Mhm.
um, but I didn't really feel like that would be supremely natural for this, just because I felt like Ellie and Lawson's relationship had to get so far along, to the point where they had to really trust each other before this book could end. Otherwise, it would feel unfinished. So for this one in particular, I knew where the reveal was going to happen for the villain,
Mhm.
but I'd initially planned on it being a little bit earlier. And so whenever I really thought about it and thought about cutting it into two books, because it was originally one full book, but that just felt too cumbersome, to be honest. I really thought that maybe that reveal could happen a little bit later in the storyline, and I was able to find a natural place for that and have that be the way it ends and
Got
going into book 2.
Nice cliffhanger.
Oh, yeah, gotta love them.
And do you have a favorite quote or a favorite scene from this book?
Yes, I will have to read it, though. So they're obviously Ellie and Lawson enjoy each other's company. They're best friends eventually. But their relationship progresses, and because of that, there is a love that develops. And my favorite quote is actually from Ellie whenever she is telling Lawson indirectly that she's in love with him. And if you read the book, which obviously Taylor you have, you'll know what I mean. But the quote itself is, "There is something about knowing I cannot love you forever that makes me love you harder while I still can."
Mhm. It's so beautiful. Like, do
Thank
you ever
you.
just like stop and think, like, wow, I wrote that? Like, I don't know. Like these quotes like that, I mean, the one that you just said and like other quotes from, there's popular quotes that are on t-shirts and
Mhm.
stickers, like it's awesome.
It's pretty crazy. I a few weeks ago I decided to go back and just flip through it a little bit. One of my author's copies over here. And I read it and I told my husband who was sitting on the couch, I go, I don't really remember writing this because it feels like a real book.
Mhm.
Like I don't did I this came out of me. So
That's such an accomplishment, to have your first book. Like that's awesome. That's awesome. And so sometimes when we write characters, obviously we describe them because it's important for us to know what they look like, but sometimes people fan cast. So is there anybody that you would fan cast as Ellie or Lawson or both?
oh, so Lawson, my husband always teases me for my celebrity crushes. Um, Lawson, I really pictured as a slightly younger Henry Cavill or like Matt Bomer,
Hmm.
definitely Lawson. And then Ellie was a little bit harder actually because I knew kind of what I wanted her to look like, but as far as like finding someone who actually really looked like her to give a good basis, that was actually a little bit trickier. But I found a girl who I didn't know any of her works, but she's very beautiful, and so I'm sure she's very talented too. But Daniela Neves, I believe, is her name. And so finding her though, I was like, oh, look, that's Ellie right there.
I'll have to look her up because I don't know her, but obviously I know Henry Cavill and Matt Bomer. I love Matt Bomer, like so much. Okay, so let's go dive into, and that was a pun, the next interview. Just fun questions. So, what do you like to do in for fun besides reading and writing?
um, I spend a lot of time with my dogs. I actually get the privilege to work from home. I work for a company, so I'm based in Northwest Arkansas, and
Mm.
I actually work for a company that's based out of Boston.
Wow.
So I get to take all my meetings in my pajamas if I want to. My dogs are laying on my feet, and so all day I'm at their command, and I'm just their humble servant. Um, all of our family lives right here in the area. We're extremely fortunate for that. So we do spend a lot of time with my parents and my husband's parents. We live in the Ozark Mountains and we love doing things like hiking. And my husband likes to fish, and I don't like to fish, but I like to read while he fishes, which is fine. And I will try just about any coffee on the planet. So if there's a new coffee shop opening, I'm gonna go to it.
I love that. I've done that before, like just like gone and like sat there and just like gotten, a cup of coffee and it's so satisfying. And so you mentioned obviously having a full-time job or part-time or another career. So how do you kind of find time to write? Like, I mean, for me, like I work all day and I literally just want to sit there and just do nothing. So like how do you find motivation? How do you do that?
A lot of it for me, because my other career is full time as well. I have always found that I work better at night
Mhm.
anyway for more creative things. I also do photography on the side just a little bit, not as much anymore, but even then I would edit better at night. It was more just almost a decompression thing for me, because I've spent all day making sure that my clients are taken care of, making sure that our projects are taken care of. And so, really, this is a point where there's no world other than the one I'm creating. And because of that, it flows a little bit more naturally for me. And my husband, like I said, whenever I wrote these shallow waters, he would entertain our dogs a lot if they weren't laying by me. And it really just allowed me to just kind of spread out mentally, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yes, for sure. And I think, using it as a decompression obviously is really great self-care and obviously it makes other people happy. So that's um and this is my favorite question of the whole interview. Who are some authors or books that you would recommend?
Oh my goodness. First of all, Hannah Witten. She is someone that For the Wolf,
I haven't read
Hemlock
it
Queen.
yet.
Yes.
Red Fox
Uh,
Book, I bought this one.
yes. I have a signed copy of each of her books hanging out over there on the wall. But she is someone that really has inspired me as a writer and just as a general person, because she is so her building is so beautiful, and she uses amazing word choice, which is obviously my kryptonite. So knowing what someone else has created and seeing it and seeing something I aspire to, it's really nice. And she really manages to entangle the characters' relationships, whether it's sibling or romantic or otherwise, so beautifully amongst the entire plot. And she does a brilliant job. And so I always recommend Hannah's books because she's amazing and I love her dearly. um, Grace Newman is another indie author. She actually recently got representation, as well as she has a new book coming out. And she builds a lot of strong female characters. So
Okay.
if readers want strong female characters, go read Grace's books because she's amazing. And she's just the sweetest human ever as well. Um, Another great world builder, though, is Nicola Tyke. She is the
Yes.
author of the North Queen trilogy, which, by the way, whenever I found out she's writing more in that universe, my
Yeah.
head exploded from excitement. So I messaged her, oh my goodness.
Crap out of me.
The sign was just excited. It's fine.
I know. No. Our house is a little bit haunted, so it's fine.
Oh, that's fun. But
Going Nicola Techie.
yeah, no, Nicole is just her again. Her world building is absolutely incredible. She is uh, fully immersed in fantasy in the North Queen trilogy, as you know, and it's just so vivid. Her descriptions are just beautiful, and it's so like I feel like I'm there, which depending on what part of the country you're in at that point may or may not be a good thing. But uh, but those are definitely some I would recommend.
Awesome. Very cool. Very cool. So if you had to give some advice to either an aspiring author or a younger you, what would you say? What would you tell that person?
Um, to definitely be your own target audience. I think that is a big deal, especially in today's market. We see all of the little tables at Barnes and Noble, which I love Barnes and Noble,
Yes.
but we see all of the tables that say, "Oh, the Greek mythology retellings," or thriller, whatever. But there are definitely trends in writing that come around, which are great. It allows everyone to bond through what they're reading and all of these wonderful things. But I do think as an author, you should be the person that you're writing for. You have to be able to show up for yourself because nobody else will. And you just can't care what anybody else thinks. Now, obviously it'll go through plenty of edits and everything like that where you can refine it, but that initial story and the first time you draft your story, it's you telling it to yourself. And in that moment, you just have to allow yourself the grace to be free with it and say it how you want.
Mhm. That's that's actually really interesting that you say that because I think, with some trad authors, like they do write to the trends, right? And what's popular. I mean, romantasy is obviously a huge buzzword right now, so everybody wants that. Um,
Mhm.
but I really like that you said like be a fan of, what you write because then that just like you said, it makes you feel like you can be very authentic with like that's what I would want to read, rather than like writing for somebody else that maybe you don't know what they want to read.
Absolutely. And not to mention the fact that you need to write the book that you want to read because you're going to read that book 80, 100 million
Mhm.
times while you're editing it.
Very true. That's very true. And so you did mention music. And so for These Shallow Waters, what music did you listen to? What were some inspiring songs?
So I'm a big Taylor Swift fan. Swifty, love it. Yeah. I just rewatched the Eras tour on Disney Plus the other night. Um, and so obviously there's a bunch of Taylor Swift in there. My husband was actually a metalhead in high school. He was in a band and all these things. So that has really brought in some new inspirations. So there's this band called Dance Gavin Dance, and they have some really just unique songs that are they push boundaries in what they discuss, but also it's also beautiful and melodic. It's something called swancore, which has something to do with the guy who discovered them. But there's there's definitely a variety. I did create a playlist for it on Spotify, so you're welcome to go find it. It's public.
Cool.
Um, so yeah, it was a lot of fun to create. And it wasn't one of those things where I created the playlist first and then made the book. It was definitely as I was writing the book, I found the songs that would match it. And sometimes we'd be in the car and I'd go, "Hey, replay that song because I want to hear that." And he goes, "Are you thinking for your book?" He knows me.
And so you said that when you went on vacation and then you came back and wrote this book in 6 weeks, was the vacation somewhere that inspired the setting, or is there anywhere in the world that you have traveled or that exists that inspires the world that you
So it did
obviously it sets place it's in Scotland. Yeah.
sure. I have not gotten the privilege to go to Scotland. It is one place that we've looked at traveling before. So I would love to visit, especially Betty Hill because it is a real town. But no, we were actually in a tropical vacation, and it's definitely something though that we've looked at, and we would like to eventually.
I mean, maybe the tropical part like inspired. I don't know if you went snorkeling or scuba diving or something because like, that could inspire like the worlds, but beneath that we can, you know,
It
make.
was fun watching the waves, and it definitely helped actually come up with the name because the name was something I wrestled with for a while. But we would sit on the beach, and I would go, hey, look at that. So my poor husband had to deal with a preoccupied me the entire time we were on vacation. It's all I could think about.
And so how did you choose Betting Hill? Like how did that like why there?
I knew the country that I wanted, and out of no other reason other than it was beautiful and you see all these rolling moors and it's kind of desolate but it's populous and it's a nice little mixture, but specifically Betty Hill because I wanted a place far enough north that um, it was definitely off the beaten path, but it had to be reachable for Ellie and her friend Caitlin to go there. So attainable, realistic, but also far enough out that they can get way out in the middle of nowhere ocean land for future things that happen. So
Got it. Cool. And so do you have any signings coming up, any events? What are you doing to help promote your book?
yeah, a lot of it's going to be through social media, but I actually do have a couple of signings coming up. One of which will be next Thursday at a local brewery called Boston Mountain. It's in Fayetteville, Arkansas. So we were there talking with one of my friends who's also in the acknowledgments, and I was giving her copy, And one of the owners comes by and she goes, "Oh, is it a book club?" And my friend goes, "No, she wrote it." And of course, I'm blushing furiously and stuttering all over my words like the eloquent person that I am. And so it just all got to work from there. And they were very kind and wanted to post a signing for me. And so we'll go there. And then there's a couple of places that I'm speaking with and trying to get one fully arranged. So
Awesome. So some things to look forward to.
mhm.
Um, I think I asked all my questions. I did, right?
I think so. Yep.
Um, and so you can go and get these shallow waters now. And so, where is it available? Where can people get it?
It is available on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com as ebooks and paperback. However, you can also get it if you're local to Northwest Arkansas or traveling in for any reason. We do have some large companies here like Walmart. Um, then Pearl's Books off of the town square has it in stock. They have signed copies. Or my website has a link to where you can purchase signed copies, as well as character art cards and stickers and bookmarks and that kind of thing. So
Well, so if you haven't checked this book out, you absolutely have to go check it out. It's so wonderful to be able to talk with you, a debut author, and we can't wait to see what other worlds and what other stories you come up with.
thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time and speaking with me, Taylor.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
You too.